Greetings, folks. Iolair here, coming to you with another update from the World of Warships development blog. This article was posted today, Thursday, August 20th, and covers a conceptual test, some ideas that Wargaming is working on with regard to AA and detectability of ships by air. I want to stress that these changes are in closed testing. They're not, or they're about to enter closed testing. They're not available to the public. I think Wargaming is just trying to keep the community apprised of ideas and direction that they're thinking about with regard to AA and the influence of carriers and detectability by air, etc., etc. So it's possible that none of this would be implemented in the product, but just some ideas that Wargaming is working on. So I'll go through these 3 points. I'll add some colored commentary about what I think the motivations are. And in fact, Wargaming has some rationale at the end of this article about why they're trying to make these changes, or they're looking at these changes. But I think there are some other implications beyond what they've just cited here. So the first item is that detectability range by air of all ships would be significantly reduced, between 40 and 60%. So surface detection would not change, only detection by air of all ships. So some 2 or 3 weeks ago, Wargaming had a Dolman blog announcement where they were thinking about cutting the air detectability of just destroyers in half. It looks like they're going to be extending that, or they would extend that to all ships. Again, this is not finalized, so I shouldn't be trying to use definitive terms here. So that's the first change. The second change that's being proposed is that when activated with the P key, which is the default for turning AA on and off, AA defenses would no longer instantly operate at 100% capacity, but instead would gradually increase in efficiency, reaching 100% after 7 seconds. And then the inverse applies when deactivating AA with the same key. So if a player turned on AA and planes were within the AA aura, the AA would gradually ramp up to 100% efficiency, or even if planes weren't in the AA aura, it basically takes 7 seconds for AA to ramp up to full efficiency. And then when you turn off AA, your AA would gradually decrease from 100% to 0% over a 7-second period. And then the third point here is AA guns have a preliminary firing range at 30% higher than a ship's maximum AA range. So for example, if you were in a ship that had an AA range of 6 kilometers, you would have a preliminary firing range that goes out to 7.8 kilometers, so 30% further. And it says that when flying in this outer aura, shell explosions appear above and below the course of a squadron, and continuous damage is not dealt. So the way I read that is that if planes were to enter this preliminary firing aura that's 30% further out than the maximum AA range, they would not take damage, but at least they would be aware that they were about to enter an AA bubble. Now, Wargaming's rationale behind these changes are a few, and I think there's a couple other implications, or a few other implications here. So the changes would allow players to choose between fighting planes or relying on stealth to avoid them in different situations. I think that's clearly aimed at destroyers. The idea is that destroyers, with their better concealment by air, would have an easier time avoiding planes altogether, and would only turn AA on either because it was a mistake, and in fact this would in fact, cutting the air detectability in half is even stronger motivation for making sure that your AA is turned off by default when a game starts. But I think the motivation here is to make it easier for destroyers to avoid plane detection at all, or they would only turn on AA if it was like a last-ditch effort to save themselves, or they were trying to provide some overlapping AA for allies or whatever. So basically make it more selective under what conditions you would turn AA on, and also make it easier to avoid air detection altogether. Now, they also mention here that after lowering AA detection ranges, AA guns could start firing while a ship was hidden. So this is actually an issue not only under the current proposal, but is an issue even today. So it's not uncommon that when a squadron flies into the AA bubble of a ship, especially one that has very strong AA, like a Minotaur or a Des Moines or something, that they can't even see the ship for a moment, and before they're already exposed to the full wrath of the AA, right? And again, I know there's lots of anti-CV players. They're like, who cares? Shoot down the planes. I'm not going to get into the debate about whether CV should be in the game in this video. That deserves its own topic. But I think the idea here is that the mechanics of the preliminary firing aura is to ensure that a carrier that was about to fly into an AA bubble would be able to mitigate damage, because they would be exposed to the preliminary firing first and then have a chance to potentially maneuver and avoid the AA altogether. Now, one thing I should also stress here is that even if your air detection is cut in half, you would still be detected at your full AA range if your AA were turned on. So if you were in a Minotaur, which has an AA range of 6.9 kilometers, and even if your surface detection, or your aerial detection, excuse me, is less than 6.9 kilometers, if your AA is turned on, you're going to be detected at 6.9 kilometers. And what it doesn't say in this article is that if a plane flies into your preliminary AA range, will that also make you visible from aerial detection, or does that only happen once the planes actually enter the formal AA range, or full AA range of the ship, and not the preliminary range? So that part's not entirely clear here. Couple other observations I want to make on this. So on the second item, where they talk about that they would gradually ramp up the influence of AA if you turned it on, and then gradually reduce it when you turned it off. Part of the spirit behind that, my read is you'll have situations today where a carrier will fly his planes into the AA bubble of a very strong AA destroyer, like a Kidd or a Holland or something like that, and still not detect the destroyer. And then the destroyer could turn on the AA by pressing the P key, and suddenly the planes are immediately exposed to the full wrath of the AA of the destroyer. And I think the idea with gradually ramping up the efficiency of the AA gives the carrier player an opportunity to try to mitigate or get out of the bubble, if they can. You basically give them 7 seconds of gradually increasing AA rather than being exposed to everything instantly. Again, yes, I know there's plenty of people that strongly dislike carriers and want to shoot down as many planes as possible, but I can kind of understand the rationale behind this, because I also play with players that play CVs regularly, and they see this as an issue where they will enter an AA bubble of a ship that they can't see and suddenly be exposed to all of its fire instantly, and they have no recourse. So I can kind of see where some of these changes come into play. The last observation I would make about these proposed changes, and it refers specifically to the first item and reducing the air detectability of ships. I think a consequence, or an intended consequence of this, is that it will make carrier players will have to do more work to keep an opposing fleet spotted. I think that is a potential implication. Certainly, it's going to make it harder to detect and keep an eye on the destroyers. That part is clear. But it may also make it harder for carrier players to keep fleets detected, like they do today. And I know this is a common complaint, especially in the competitive community and ranked battles and clan battles, etc., that carriers have completely changed the meta. They basically make the meta very stale. So I kind of read that a potential implication, like I said, of reducing the detectability by air of ships is to make the carrier have to essentially do more work to try to keep the fleet spotted. Now, maybe that won't be an issue at all, because most ships other than destroyers will keep their AA turned on by default, and therefore would remain relatively well detected, because their AA would keep them keep themselves spotted. I don't know. Well, we'd have to see. But in any case, some very interesting proposed changes from Wargaming. I don't think any of us can internalize what the full implications are of these changes if they were to be implemented. Again, I think this is just a concept. Well, in fact, we know this is just a conceptual test. Just to sort of think through some ideas that would help strike some better balance in the interplay of carriers, AA, and detection. So I hope you found the information here useful and interesting. Feel free to leave your comments and questions below. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.